Hello reception, it's Mrs. Dove again, and I'm here with the second part in our active story lessons for this week. So we will be continuing with the rest of the story of Aesop's fable, The Hare and the Tortoise. But before we do that, I'd like us to see if we can remember some of the things that have happened in the story so far. So, can you remember who the main characters are in the story? There were two of them, two main characters. That's right, there was the hare and the tortoise. Can you remember some of the things that happened in the story so far? Have a little think. I can remember that the hare was boasting. He was showing off a lot to his friends, wasn't he, about what a super fast runner he was. And he challenged the tortoise to a race. And the tortoise was happy to accept his challenge. I can also remember that they made lots of preparations. The hare did lots of training, and the other animals made a map, didn't they? They made a route for the race to run. And then, Tortoise was very sensible. He went to bed early the night before the race, and then when he woke up, he had a really healthy and hearty breakfast, so he was all set to do his best. But the hare, he wasn't quite so sensible, was he? Do you remember what he did? Yes, he had a party with all of his friends, and he stayed up really late. Didn't get to bed early. And then how did he feel when he woke up in the morning? Yeah, really, really exhausted. Now, I asked you to make a prediction, to have a guess about what you thought might happen next in the story. Can you remember what your prediction was? Okay, well, I'll get on with the rest of the story, and you can find out then if your prediction was right. Out in the meadow, the animals were gathering for the race. There were stalls selling cakes and sandwiches. Balloons and bunting had been tied to trees. A party atmosphere was building. At last it was time for the race to start. Feeling more like his usual self, the hare took his place at the start line. "Get ready to lose," he said to the tortoise. The tortoise just smiled. He didn't seem in the least bit worried. Then the fox began the countdown to the race. On your marks, get set. The whistle blew and they were off. The hare dashed away at full speed, around the meadow, then up the hill. He stopped to look back and saw the tortoise plodding along far behind. Grinning happily, the hare danced a little jig on the hilltop. The story describes Tortoise as plodding along. What do you think plodding means? Plodding means walking or moving really slowly, as if your feet feel really heavy. Do you think you can show your grown-up what plodding looks like? Well, get up, see if you can plod around the room. Hare danced a little jig. What do you think he was doing? That's right, it's a lively type of dance. Can you do a jig too? Have a go. As he ran down the hill, the hare grabbed some crunchy lettuces from a field. He stopped for a mid-morning snack. Yummy! The sun was warm and he decided to have a short nap. After all, he'd had a late night and the tortoise was far behind. In the meantime, the tortoise carried on, up the hill and over the top. He saw the hare snoozing under a tree and marched bravely past. The hare didn't stir a whisker. Much later, feeling stiff and cold, the hare woke up with a start. He looked up at the sun and saw how low it was in the sky. It must be almost evening. He feared the worst. The hare flew around the rest of the route at top speed. He ran like he'd never run before. But in the distance, he heard shouting and clapping and could just make out the tortoise nearing the finish line. With the finish line in sight and the crowd roaring him on, the tortoise staggered on as fast as he could. A few minutes later, he crossed the line to huge applause and the crowd shouting his name. Okay, so some more questions. Tortoise staggered on at the end of the race. What do you think that means, to stagger? Have a little think. Tell your grown-up your idea. That's right. If somebody staggers, that means they're walking or moving really quite unsteadily, probably as if they were about to fall over. And when Tortoise crossed the line, there was lots of applause. What do you think that means? That's right. Applause is another word for clapping. So they were really clapping him as he came over the finish line. The hare had lost his own challenge. From now on, perhaps he wouldn't be so boastful. Slow and steady wins the race. Now that we've listened to the whole story, I've got some extra questions for you. And I wonder if you can remember the details from the story to answer them. Or, if you can't remember, listen to the story again to find the answers. Okay, so question 1. What was being sold at the stalls near to the race? Question 2. Why did the hare decide to have a short nap? Question 3. How did the hare know it was almost evening? And lastly, question 4. What was the crowd shouting as the tortoise crossed the finish line? See if you can find the answers to those in the story. Did you find the answers to my questions? Well done if you did. Now, I hope you've enjoyed our active story on Aesop's fable, The Hare and the Tortoise. It's really good to listen to a different type of story, isn't it? So, thank you for joining in, and I'll see you all in school next week. Bye for now.